Something that a lot of us learn early on when we're doing photography is this concept of fill the frame. That means whatever the subject is, food, people, dogs, whatever it is, flowers, getting close and fill the frame. There's no point in leaving negative space, headroom, whatever it might be. And this is a pretty good concept, especially early on, because it forces you to think about how you want to set up the shot, how you want the shot to look. And it makes you think about composition and actually forces you into making decisions like removing headspace when it comes to portraits, removing unnecessary negative space. And that could be a really useful tool when you're learning about composition, you're learning photography. But is it always the best option? Let's talk about it. So what do we mean when we say fill the frame? Well, essentially, it's a way of identifying your subject and then filling your photo with that subject. And this is a great technique, especially when you're learning photography or you're trying to get better at photography. It forces you to do a lot of things. It forces you to identify your subject, which obviously is easy in portraiture because it's whoever you're taking a photo of, but food photography, landscape, street photography, loads of stuff like that, it's not always as obvious what this subject is. And this is a great way of forcing you to actually identify, okay, what is the subject of my photo? And then making it the key focus point of the photo, filling the frame with it. It's going to help with composition because it's going to force you to think about how to frame up your photo, whether it's portraiture and you're eliminating that unnecessary headroom, whether it's negative space around your subject, moving yourself around to get that better shot to fill the frame. It's just a really great technique because it kind of works as a catch-all for a lot of different things you need to learn when you're composing your photo. But is it always the right choice when you're taking a photo? Well, the pretty short answer is no. There's no just one-size-fits-all technique for capturing a fantastic photograph. It's a great thing for learning photography, for learning composition, all that kind of stuff, but it doesn't work in every situation. So you've probably heard a lot about telling a story with a photo as well, and that's a big deal, right? If you can tell a story with your photo, it's going to really take it from a good photo to a great photo. There's a lot of ways you can do that, and one of the biggest ways that you can affect that is by deciding how much of your surroundings around your subject to include in the photo. Let's take this one as an example. So this is a shot of Matilda, the model I use for all kinds of different stuff in all kinds of different videos. This is in Dorset, and I've gone for a super wide shot. So she's really small in the photo, but it makes it a much more kind of adventure-y feel, travel, a much better photo, I think, than if it was a tighter photo of just her on these rocks. It's kind of a portrait kind of thing. I think this works so much better, and that's because I've included the surroundings. There's a lot of space around her. So she's still the subject of the photo, absolutely. But the surroundings play a huge part in telling the story of where she is, what she's doing, and what's going on. Another example that works very well, I love taking photos of the lighthouse up at Beachy Head, right? I love taking lots of different photos. There's lots of different compositions that you can get from that. And it works really well. Now this photo, for example, the lighthouse is very small. I've framed it up with the foreground, which I really like. The lighthouse is still the subject of the photo, but you've got some kind of context of where it is, a nice kind of sunny day, the clouds in the sky, all that kind of stuff, and these plants in the foreground that work really well to frame it in the photo, which is also a nice way of kind of composing your photo. Now the lighthouse is small in this photo, but I think it works really well. Similarly, this snowy landscape has the lighthouse as the subject, but I've gone for a wide shot to get the snowy landscape, the road kind of snaking through the landscape, and it really kind of shows off the vista, it shows off where this lighthouse is, standing there in this kind of cold, snowy landscape. But then some other shots of the lighthouse might want to be much more zoomed in, might want to be much more filling the frame. So this one, for example, the lighthouse isn't exactly filling the frame, but it's much, much bigger and it's much more prominent in the frame. It is the main thing that you can actually see in this photo, and that works really well as well. Now, there's no kind of right or wrong way of doing this. There's no correct decision, but the biggest thing here is making that decision, actually choosing which shot to go for, whether to go wide, whether to include lots of negative space. Here's a portrait of me, here's a portrait of Matilda, both filling the frame. And then here's another shot of Matilda walking off into the forest, which wouldn't be the same. It wouldn't have the same feel to it if I'd actually filled the frame with just Matilda. You needed to have some of the surroundings. But that's not to say that these other portraits were no good. There's no right or wrong answer here. The main takeaway, the main thing to think about is, does your decision serve the the photo? Are you telling the right story with the composition that you're going for? Now, this is kind of the next level step for what we were doing previously with things like actually filling the frame. You know, when we first learned fill the frame, is to force us to think about composition, is to force us to think about remove that headroom, remove the negative space, think about how the shot is going to look. And this is kind of the next step up. Should you fill the frame? Forces us to think about the story of the photo, forces us to think about what serves the purpose of the photo. What are you trying to tell with this photo? What are you trying to say? Now, I'm not actually a massive fan of the phrase tell a story with your photography, because it makes me always feel, and certainly when I was learning photography, it always made me feel like trying to take a book cover shot. You know, where you're trying to tell a story of what this book is and it's this whole thing and it's like Narnia or something like that. That's not what it is. And obviously you realize that over time anyway. Even if you thought that like I did, you realize this anyway. This shot of Matilda that I mentioned earlier, it tells a story of her out on an adventure taking photographs. It's no more than that, but it's more of a story than if it was just the tight shot of her. You know, the snowy landscape tells the story of the snowy landscape, as opposed to the close-up shot of the lighthouse, which wouldn't tell the same story. And when you're deciding whether or not to fill the frame with your subject, whether or not to, you know, create some negative space around your subject or not, you need to think about that story. What is the feel that you're trying to give with this photo? Is it that, you know, this stormy, empty day with something very small in the frame, you know, snowy, big storms, something small, that'd be very powerful, rather than just a tight shot of whatever it is that's very small. Are you trying to actually zoom through all the clutter around to focus on one thing? In which case, absolutely, a tighter shot is going to work, fill the frame. But that conscious decision is what will make it a good photo. And if you just think about that every time you go to take the photo, should I be filling the frame or not? Are the surroundings part of what makes this an interesting subject? Are the surroundings part of the story of the subject? Is that part of the feel I'm trying to get with this photo? Well, then that's going to take your photography up another level. And it's like when we learnt in the beginning to fill the frame. Now we're learning, maybe you don't have to every time. Maybe sometimes you don't want to fill the frame. Now, of course, I'd love to hear if you have anything to add, pop it down in the comments. Links in the description, as you already know. Like and subscribe, all the cool stuff. Ring the bell if you want. I never say it, but ring the bell. I'd love that. I'd love it. I'll see you in the next video. And as always, thanks for watching.